Today I will be talking to you about euthanasia and human rights in Australia. Australia's legislation marks euthanasia or assisting someone's suicide a crime. The act of helping someone to end their life can end up turning into a manslaughter charge against you. For those who do not know, euthanasia is the painless killing of a patient suffering from an incurable and painful disease, or in an irreversible coma. It is not the opportunity for a healthy person suffering from a mental illness or someone who is mentally disabled who isn't deemed able to make this choice for themselves, regardless of circumstance. Euthanasia gives an opportunity to end people's suffering and pass with dignity instead of prolonged agony and helplessness. For instance, a quadriplegic who has lost the ability to speak, feed themselves and suffers from painful attacks, or a terminally ill cancer patient who is losing their battle to cancer. We cannot walk in these people's shoes and have our government decide whether they should be allowed to die or not. It should be up to the people in this unfortunate position to decide when enough is enough. In the Northern Territories, a bill was passed legalising euthanasia called Rights of the Terminally Ill Act 1995, but within a year and a half it was repealed and no longer legal. This is the closest other country we have come to the legalisation of assisted suicide and ending patient suffering. Tasmania these days is at the forefront of trying to pass a bill. In 2013, an act lost 13 to 12 against and is mostly supported by the Greens. It is only fair that someone should be able to have their decision in ending their suffering. It should not be left up to the governments to decide when enough is enough. Why I feel so strongly about euthanasia and the reason patients and loved ones should be given the right to decide when enough is enough and suffering should end. When I was in year 8, my grandfather and best friend, who was suffering from pancreatic cancer, was put into an induced coma after surgery complications. The nurses and doctors put his painkillers up to the maximum and he was left to die. I don't understand why euthanasia could not have been given in this situation. I understand that at the moment it is not legal, but this is why I believe it should be legal. My grandfather was forced to lie there for days, nurses no longer feeding him and having his painkillers supposedly halting his pain. But at the end of the day, we do not really know this. I don't understand why a dignifying passing cannot be given to the patient. My grandfather and us as a family should have been given the right to allow him to pass when we chose and he chose. It should not have been left up to the stages where because he hadn't had eaten for that many days, that's why he passed. Euthanasia is a tool that can help in these circumstances. It should not be left up to the governments and bills and people in the Senate and Greenhouse to decide when enough is enough. I cannot stress enough that it should be the patient's and family's choice to end suffering, no one else but theirs. How euthanasia can be administered can come in two forms. An injection form in the Netherlands, an injection is given to the patient to render them comatose, followed by a second injection to stop the heart. First, a patient is put into an induced coma via intravenous administration, followed by given a muscle relaxant. The patient usually dies as a result of the muscle relaxant. This stops the heart from beating and stops the blood being regulated around the body. The patient will die shortly after a pain-free passing. An oral form of the drug, a doctor can write a prescription that is intended to kill the patient. The patient must be warned that in a single dose of this drug, their heart will stop and they will pass away. This is only ever given to patients who are in need due to terminal illness or painful circumstances. In America, this drug can even be subsidized or paid by the government. After taking the oral form of the tablet, the patient will shortly die after. Countries this is legal in are as follows: Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, Colombia, United States, Switzerland, Germany, Japan, and Canada. Although in the US states it is only in Washington, Oregon, Vermont, New Mexico, Montana, and California. The rest of the world is starting to come on board with the idea of euthanasia and giving the patient the right to die on their terms. Australia should be next. Cost to fly to these countries can exceed what a patient can afford, and legal ramifications for loved ones that assisted in this suicide overseas could follow them back to Australia. Although prosecution is rare, why should the loved ones be put at risk? This is for the patient to stop their suffering, not on the loved ones. I'm sure any patient who would want to take these drastic measures overseas wouldn't want their loved ones to be punished here. So it is only fair that as a result our government should start to take into consideration a fair euthanasia being implemented in Australia. There are some simple arguments against euthanasia that just don't make sense and shouldn't be left for other people's judgments. The given case that it's God's will to take someone from this planet would easily be overturned by people thinking this way if they were in these circumstances. I'm sure if someone was suffering from terminal illness, they would desirably want to pass away on their terms if it came to that point. As well, people say that palliative care makes euthanasia unnecessary. But that's unfair to someone who doesn't want to be in palliative care. For someone to be a burden on someone else can come at huge mental cost to themselves. They might not want to live in a state where someone has to wipe their bum. They cannot go to the toilet for themselves, cannot feed themselves, can hardly hold a conversation with their loved ones. It is unfair for someone to make the call that someone doesn't have the right to end their life. People say that euthanasia weakens our society, but I don't think that makes sense. It won't be given to everyone and anyone who wants the option to pass away. It will be given to the people who deserve it, the people who want it due to terminal illness. I cannot stress that point enough. It is not for the person with a mental disorder or someone with a mental disability. It is for the person who has chronic pain, who wakes up every day hurting. It is someone fighting their last breaths due to cancer. It is their choice to pass away. Their choice. People say that euthanasia gives doctors too much rights. It is not the same respect as a vet putting an animal down when we say that surgery and other forms of medication will hurt the animal more. Saying that the doctor has too much rights in euthanasia, it is not up to the doctor. It will never be the doctor's call. It will always be the patient telling you that they need to pass. Their suffering has needed to come to an end. These arguments saying that it is not the patient's right, it is God's right, it is weakening society and palliative care is good enough is just ridiculous. Until these people are walking in the sufferer's shoes, I don't think their voice has a place in our modern society. Who will benefit from euthanasia is pretty obvious. We, politicians and the overall government, should not be allowed to judge and make this call. Envision yourself as someone who is suffering from chronic pain, an incurable disease or terminal cancer, who is losing their battle and is becoming weaker by the day, no longer being able to do the basics of life, whose pain threshold has been taken to its toll, medicine no longer granting any relief. You are bedbound and can't even make it to the toilet on your own anymore. This unimaginable suffering of yours should be able to be put to a stop by a peaceful passing. It is these people who are at the end of their roads and should be granted relief who will truly benefit from the laws legalizing euthanasia. As well, for the family members, doctors and nurses who have to watch this unfold firsthand, to be in the position if they assist could face potential jail time, regardless of circumstances, is baffling. There has come a time where our understanding is far greater than it has ever been in modern medicine, and if it is known that someone will not recover or cannot be aided in their suffering anymore, isn't it only fair that they should be allowed to pass when they decide?